Welcome to GM Mastermind, a tabletop RPG podcast that features a panel of game masters known as the Brain Trust. In this episode, we will be discussing the ins and outs of being a professional game master. Introducing the Brain Trust for this episode. Welcome, Nikki Yeager. Nikki's been a game master for over 9 years. The games she's GM'd the most include Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, Shadowrun 6th Edition, Monster of the Week, Necrobiotic, Teens in Space, Lewd Grannies, and Honey Heist. Currently, she's playing D&D 5th Edition, Teens in Space, Shadowrun 6E, Necrobiotic, Savage Worlds, Deadlands, Monster of the Week, and Vampire the Masquerade. She's the creator of Beholder to No One and Chaotic Wonderful live streams. She can be found on Weave the Tale on Twitch, and also streaming on 2000 Tales on YouTube. For professional GMing, she can be found on Start Playing and Tour Guide Games. Keep a lookout for Dice Before Dawn and Sound Control RPG, 2 future podcasts in the making. Welcome, Don. Don has been a game master for over 30 years. He's GM'd D&D 2nd all the way to 5th Edition, and everything in between, Call of Cthulhu 6th and 7th editions, and Powered by the Apocalypse games. Most recently, he's playing D&D 5e to include Dragonlance and Dark Sun, as well as heavily modified version of Mothership and Hack Miami, a PBTA cyberpunk game. He is the lead narrative designer for Fallout the RPG and Dark Matter for D&D 5th edition. Sign up for his newsletter, check out his game designs and his open seats for his ongoing campaigns at his Patreon. Hello, I'm Sean. I'm the host of the show. Having a 15-year break from RPGs, I've been GMing on and off since 2003. Some of my favorite RPGs to GM include Delta Green, Forbidden Lands, and Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars. I've been gaming on and off since I was a wee lad. Now, on to the episode. Nikki and Don, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. How are ya?
Having us.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, you bet. All right. So today we are talking about professional game mastering, and Nikki and Don are professional game masters. And I apologize if that's not the right term. Some people may say, well, I don't want to be known as a professional GM. Is that the right moniker?
I don't know if there's a better one, at least from my perspective. It's literally what I do. And, you know, I think with Nikki, too, you mentioned all those different games that we play. It's not just Dungeons and Dragons. So I think some people say I'm a professional dungeon master, but we definitely don't just play Dungeons and Dragons. So
I can definitely agree to that, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard the moniker GM for hire thrown around as well. I don't know.
I like that. It's mercenary. It sounds like.
It sounds a lot better than looking for paid games because people misunderstand that one and are like, wait, you're paying? I'm like, no, pay me.
Yeah. So I think to lay down some of the context around, you know, we had the introduction and some of the games that you both have played and the games you've game mastered the most, but not even really touching on how long you've actually been doing game mastering as like a full-time job or maybe not so much. So Nikki, I'm going to start with you quick. How long ago did you venture into professional game mastering, and what is that? Do you consider that your full-time job?
I don't consider it my full-time job. It's technically a bunch of little part-time jobs that just equal 2 full-time jobs, basically. But I started officially doing it for money last year, so I'm fairly new to the professional side of things. I think I started in June or July of last year.
Okay. And Don, what about you?
Well, I started running games for pay 4.5 years ago, and I think initially I was getting paid to produce or run actual play campaigns, video campaigns on YouTube or Twitch. And about, it was shortly before the pandemic started, October of 2019, I launched my first private campaign running for people not on stream or not for performance. And I've been doing it ever since.
So when we talk about it kind of being a job or what you do for quote unquote a living, what is that? Is that a full 40-hour weeks? Because I think when we're in the traditional job mindset, right, it's like, well, I work 40 to 50 hours Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Maybe we should start there. I have so many questions and so much, like, so jazzed about this. So what does that look like for you, Don? Because I think some people also have questions on, like, does that include prep or, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to look different a little bit for every single GM based on what they do for their game, what kind of game they run and how much prep they do versus how much is just sort of improvised. But for me, after a few years of kind of like streamlining my process, one game that I run, one session plus the prep, plus the admin time, plus the communication and the scheduling, it's about 10 hours of work on average. And it might vary a little bit in one direction. So I run between 3 and 4 games per week now. And I kind of, when one of my campaigns ends and I know I have like freelance work or some other gig lined up, I'll try to drop down to 3 so that I can have like 10 hours a week to write or do whatever else it is that I'm working on. But for a while, I would say for the first almost 2 years of doing this, I was probably working closer to 80 hours a week. And I just hadn't figured out how to scale my effort, my time, the rates that I was charging to make it a sustainable living for myself. It took me a few years to kind of figure that out and get to where I am now, which is about 40 hours a week.
Nikki, what was your journey looking like when you?
Much like Don's beginning, mine is probably closer to the longer end, but I'm very much an improv DM when it comes to some of my games, and I'm very honest about that with my players. So I don't necessarily need to prep as much, which is fantastic because with everything going on, I'm doing 70, 80 hours a week. With just the professional DMing side, it's probably about 15 to 20 hours for me right now, with 2 games and one that is sporadic.
You say 15 hours, is that just prep time or per week as your gaming piece?
Prep and gaming.
Prep and gaming. So 15 hours of that. And you mentioned working 70, 80. Is that doing other things outside of game mastery?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's hard to keep track of exactly how much of it was specifically towards professional DMing when I have like 5 or 6 little things that I do.
I gotcha. Okay. And I probably should have started. How does one start professional game mastering? How did, Nikki, you start off saying, you know what, because you were in corporate America, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Like for 13 years, you mentioned to me before we started the show. And then that you were like, I'm kind of done with that. And somewhere you woke up and said, I'm gonna do this.
So when I left corporate America, I didn't really have a plan, and I started doing audio editing first. And then I was invited the same month I had quit to a LGBT plus panel for tour guide games. And that's where I met Larry Zoll, who created the company. And I asked him, how does one become a tour guide, which is basically a professional DM, but for corporations? And he's like, you just sign up. And he approved me, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. That was easy. How do I, what do I do? But basically he finds the people, and corporations will hire to do an hour-long icebreaker, like team building exercise for people who don't know how to play games. So we'll do Honey Heist or All Out of Bubblegum, like simple games that don't require a lot of effort or training. And that way it was just really easy to slide into that type of system. And then a couple months later, I jumped in to start playing games, which is where most of my money comes from.
So you work both of those, start playing games as well as, oh my God, the name
Tour
is
guide.
Tour guide. Thank you. Okay.
Yes. Tour guide is very sporadic, maybe once to 3 times a month because there's like 30 tour guides and it's based on availability. Um, and then start playing is every Saturday and Sunday night. I have a paid game every
Okay.
single week.
Gotcha. And I'm going to go into those maybe briefly a little bit down the road because I think it's like those are two distinct platforms and they do things a little differently. And I'm interested to see how those work because one, I think Tour Guide Games got a huge funding, like $6.5 million in funding recently to some venture capitalists, which is a great injection of cash flow that I'm interested in seeing how that works. But Don, how did you, I know you've streamed and you're a streamer. As a matter of fact, everybody that isn't privy to our earlier conversation, Don, I ran into on Nikki. I put it out on a Discord server and said, hey, I could use some guests, and Nikki stepped up and she's like, I do this. I'm like, great, perfect. I would love you to be on this show to cover this topic. Don, I saw on Twitter, who put out basically a tweet and said, hey, I'm a professional game master. Ask me anything. And Don was like, he got, how much do you get paid? And he put it out there. And, his candor was quite surprising because salary's always and money's always a touchy subject in the traditional workforce. But when he joined, I heard Don's voice and I automatically recognized him from a stream I had watched. And so it's not as, Don isn't as lost.
World.
Yeah, it's a very small world. But how did you start in a similar sense? Did you start out streaming then, Don, and then?
No, I think I came into it. So I've been playing tabletop games, running them for most of my life. And I'm about getting close to turning 40 now. So it's been a long time. But one of the things that I did from a very young age until, maybe about a decade ago is I would write and design and run. They were called multi-user dungeons. They were text-based MMORPGs, and I created and ran a bunch that were very role-play heavy, very similar to like a tabletop game, but it's all text-based. And imagine like if you could just log in at any time, role-play with people, interact with people, and I was a big part of that text-based RPG community on top of playing tabletop games. And I'd created a game. The last one that I made was called Atonement. It was a space horror game. And I had a decent following for that community. Is pretty large. And I decided the campaign ended after like 3 years. The story, kind of came to a good conclusion. And I decided that at the same time, I was working in the professional theater industry. So I was stage actor, stage director, and I had kind of burnt out. I was a little burnt out on doing theater all the time for my job. It just became pretty emotionally and mentally exhausting. And I wanted to do something that was mine, that I owned. So I was like, I'm just going to try some things. So I started bartending. And while I was bartending, I started writing webcomics. And I wrote this dark fantasy webcomic. And some of my players who've played Atonement and some of my other games were into it. And a guy named Will Smith, who owned, and this is also Small World, created Encounter Roleplay, and it owned Encounter Roleplay, which has since become Weave the Tale. He hired me to produce my webcomic for his website. He hired me to write and design a 5th edition dark fantasy campaign book that was funded through Kickstarter. That was the first time I'd written anything to be published that way. And he was like, hey, do you stream? And I was like, what's that mean? I've never heard this word before. And he was like, here's a link to our Call of Cthulhu game. Just watch this video. Let me know if you would be into that. And I watched it. And it was really theatrical. And I just stopped doing theater. And it was Call of Cthulhu, which I love horror. And I was like, I don't think I have the setup for this, but I'll try it. If you want to have me on as a guest, I'd be happy to give it a shot. And I kept doing it after that. And I started running my own games. And I got really into the streaming community. tangent, but I did work, in tried to make it as a professional GM in streaming, which I think is more difficult, more challenging to be a sustainable living than opening yourself up for private games and running for corporations or for schools, and all these other avenues as well. But I did that for a few years.
And so then you decided to venture out on your own and start doing it for individuals or groups, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I'd had some people reach out to me and said, I'm really not comfortable. I don't, they'd streamed before, but they didn't feel comfortable necessarily on stream with an audience, but they really wanted to play a game. And so they, asked if I'd maybe be interested in putting this together. So I did, my first campaign was a Dark Sun campaign that I launched, and just sort of to see how it would go. And I found that I enjoyed that more than I enjoyed streaming, and even more than, even a lot of the random games and home games and convention games that I'd run, that everybody was so invested at the table and everybody had so much fun, and getting paid for it, helped justify me kind of putting more effort into my prep and the resources that I provided for the players. And then the pandemic happened. Just a few months later, like 5 months later, and I had another guy reach out to me and say, I really, I've watched you play and run games online. I have a group of friends that now that the office is shutting down, we really want to do something together. None of us have ever played D&D before. Would you be interested in putting something together for that? And I did for them. And once I'd had 2 campaigns going simultaneously, I started to think that, I could do this. This is something I could do.
That's fantastic. Now, did you both have home groups? And let me ask you this. Do either of you still have home groups that you run for or play with?
Yes. So on top of DMing for professional, I also DM for podcasting, streaming, and for home games. So the reason why there were so many things that you listed is because I'm actually in like 12 active games. Some are bi-weekly, some are weekly. But I have a problem, and
that's a lot of games.
I have a problem, and TTRPGs is a solution, evidently, and I just need more of them. But I started with podcasting. Well, besides home games, I started with podcasting first, and then I dipped my toe into streaming, but not with the TTRPG community until January of this year, and then I just dived headfirst into TTRPG streaming. And that was mostly just because it was so much fun to just thrive off of these people, a lot of which who had theatrical backgrounds or had experience, which I don't. I'm a band nerd. I did not go on stage to be the center of attention. I was in the center of the band where nobody else could see me. So the fact that I could thrive off of other people's energy just made it worth it. And then I got so into character that I get super emotional and I get super drawn in, and I'm like, oh my God, I need more. But yeah, that's what I like. I try to provide that same thing to my players when I am running a game. And I have had people tell me, you've ruined other GMs for me. And I'm like, I don't know. Is that good? I think that's good. And they're like, yeah, I don't want anybody else to DM for me anymore, because you you literally made a character without realizing it. And then I started dating a person that's just like that NPC. And I'm like, what? They're like, are you magic? I'm like, we're going to have to test this theory. If you kiss after you kiss in the game, yes, I'm magic, and we're going to have to work out lotto somehow. But it's just been whatever. I don't know how I got here. I just keep doing things until it works.
It's fantastic. Don, you still have a home group?
I moved recently, right at the beginning of the pandemic, and I'd had a home group. They were my theater friends. We worked at the same theater company for years. And I still play with them when I can. The older I get, the older my friends get. And the older my friends get, the more kids they have. And, the more life takes over in one way or another. Playing home games, I think the meme challenge is always scheduling, right? Actually being able to play. So I do. I saw we still play when we can. Some of them have gotten into streaming or podcasting themselves a little bit. So when I do, I still do some actual play stuff. And when I do it, if they're available, I always reach out to them because I love playing with them. They're great people.
Yeah.
But where I live now, there's really not a meaningful tabletop community here. I've moved to Florida, and it's a relatively small town, but I think that I don't. This isn't a cop out, but like the feelings that I get when I run for my groups, and I've had really great retention with my professional campaigns. To me, it feels like a home campaign, even though it's virtual, even though we're playing online. People talk and chat in our Discord for each campaign throughout the week. They get really excited. Whatever I try to bring to it professionally, I also try to bring that feeling that we're making meaningful connections to these people. I care about my players. They make friends with themselves, people that they didn't know previously. And I think that's an absolute must for you to have a successful game. You have to have that kind of camaraderie and shared experience.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because, well, one, you have to split your time at some point, right? You can play with your friends, but they may not pay your way or their way in that regard. And then you're having to dedicate it to, hey, if I don't do these things for these two groups, I may not be able to pay rent next month. Mm-hmm. So I just wondered if that is something that you both balance currently, or if it's something where you decided, the game groups I had, in your case, Don, you moved, which probably plays a little bit of a dynamic in that as well. But was it a point where you said, I'm going to move on, great playing with these guys or gals, and that's fantastic, but I have to focus on this, and it's somehow maybe more satisfying to pursue that path? I don't know.
Yeah, I think for my group, when I was doing actual plays, I ran a campaign. It was a Dragonlance campaign that people really, really responded well to, called May Black Roses Bloom. And I wrapped some of my friend group, my home group, into that because I knew they'd love it. I knew they'd be great. Some of them were new to actual play, to streaming, but I was too. I mean, I'd only been doing it for like a year at that point. And we did together, we turned our home group into a podcast called Dice Tribe. It was like a family-friendly D&D dinosaur kind of, set in Chult campaign. And we continued to play that, but we recorded it, and I did the audio editing for that and everything. So for them, it just felt like our home game. And then I tried to turn it into a production afterwards. And so I did, once I moved professionally, have to make some sacrifices in terms of how many people I could play with. There's so many people in the community that I've become friends with and connected to that I would love to. And at one point, I don't think I was ever doing Nikki 12 campaigns at one time. But, I think for a long time I was doing like 7 a week or something like that, 8 a week sometimes. And I started to feel myself burning out. I started to feel myself creatively, mentally burning out. And I didn't want that. So I had to make some sacrifices at some point. I had to increase my rates and kind of rethink my strategy and say, well, I still keep connected with my friends, but I'm not going to be able to play with them as often. And I'll look forward to the opportunities when I can. But that's something I had to do. Otherwise, I would have been gone. I would have been out of the community and looking on to doing something entirely different.
I think for me, so I only have one home in-person game currently, and it's with my best friend. So that game is like not really gonna go anywhere. Because I go to hang out with her. Like that's really the only reason I go. it's not like the story itself is fun, but it's because I'm used to playing with professionals. It's such a laid, relaxed game, and they are like so much talking that it's just like I'm expecting something different, and I'm just like, I'm here to play my best friend. I'm here to see my best friend. But I did drop one game that I did online for 3 years when I started streaming more, and I should drop stuff. But I try to keep it balanced by not doing them weekly. So most of my weekend games, except for my paid games, are bi-weekly. So every other week I just switch between them. So Vampire one week, D&D next, or Savage Worlds one week and Teens in Space the next. So I still have the same amount of games each week, just varying which ones they are because I don't want to choose. I just want to keep playing all the things.
Yeah, because one of the things somebody mentioned was because we all get burned out, I think, to some degree. Some game masters, it's a very real issue. And so I'm curious to know how you manage burnout when you're running games and you have to kind of, if I don't feel good for maybe a week or two, I might message the group and say, I think I'm going to sit this one out, but I don't. Do you have the same type of latitude given your arrangement with clients or customers, right?
So I started doing this before Start Playing Games or Demi Plane, which has a similar service, launched, and there wasn't really a roadmap. I know other people were doing it too, but not as many. And so for me, what I did, my approach was to create a subscription service model. So people, for me, when they play with one of my games, they sign up for a certain tier on my Patreon. They pay monthly, and that tier guarantees them a certain number of games per month. And then we have a schedule that we keep. I used to do weekly for most of my games, but to try to avoid burnout and give myself more space, I do what Nikki was saying, bi-weekly campaigns now as well, or 2 per month. And that's actually a better example of what it is, because some months have 5 Wednesdays, some months have 4 Wednesdays. By doing that, by having it be a subscription service that they pay once a month for, if I need a week off because I'm at a convention, I haven't been to one since the pandemic started, but one day back at a convention, or I need to take a vacation for my mental health, then having that setup makes it a lot easier for me to reschedule those sessions ahead of time. If I have players who need to miss a session because they are sick, or it's their birthday or something, they have plans, and they tell me ahead of time, having the subscription model allows me to kind of reschedule and find ways that work for the group. And I think that has had a positive impact on my retention. I think the subscription model has had a positive impact on my retention versus the let's buy a ticket for this specific game, this specific day. And it's also helped me, as I've gone to bi-weekly or 2 games per month for all my campaigns, manage my burnout a little bit better by giving myself the space to take weeks off. And you need that. You can't do it every week. And I think players are understanding of that. They get that. But if you don't have the infrastructure to support that, if it's like, well, if I take this week off, I'm out all of my money for that week and I can't afford that, then it makes it really hard to give yourself the space you need.
Yeah. What about you, Nikki, and how you manage 12 games and not lose your mind?
Part of the reason why I play in so many games is because of my mental health issues. I use games because of my anxiety. And with my anxiety, if I hyperfixate on things, I don't have to think about my anxiety anymore. It's not there. It's pretend. It's gone. Bye-bye. But so I stay busy because of those reasons. I do get burnout though. And I've been fighting it on and off for the last 4 or 5 months between different things, whether it's audio editing or DMing. And while the players themselves are, for the professional games, are understanding, and they've told me, if you need the day off, it's fine, take the day off. Go ahead, we won't be mad. But I'm the one beating myself up about it because of the reason I'm not going to get paid if I don't run this game today. And unfortunately, I mean, thankfully I have my husband who is making enough money to cover most of the bills. So we're not relying on that money for like everything, but that is our like budget for like extra stuff or like food or groceries or something like that. And it's just like a little bit of extra. So it gets a little frustrating, but I beat myself up more than anybody else does. Everybody else is very nice. But I have a terrible retention with startplaying.games, I will say. And everybody who's left has left because of schedule conflicts or because of finances. So far, nobody has stated they left because of me, which I'm very glad they have emphasized that, because I don't need to know if you don't like my games.
Yeah, and I think some people who may listen to this are wanting to maybe explore. And what does that look like for them compared to somebody that's been doing that? And I think when they don't get all the information, they may be stepping into holes that they've never seen before. So having said that, when you decided to kind of go down this path, you probably had some things in your mind on how it would kind of play out, or some, a plan of action if you want to put it out there like that. Having said that, what did you realize when you actually got into it and had been doing it for 3, 6, 12 months that you didn't anticipate, that was kind of a surprise to you once you started doing that and getting into it? Nikki, you want to?
I think that, well, first, when I first signed up, I didn't expect anything. Like, I just signed up and said, okay, well, if something happens, something happens.
At Start Playing Games specifically?
Correct.
Yeah.
At Start Playing. Tour guides, it was more, hey, there's an availability. And I was like, yeah, I'm free. I have flexibility, thankfully, because I am a freelancer. So my weekdays are very open, and that's when corporations want to play. So I was usually like, yeah, I'm good on Wednesdays. I'm good on Thursdays. I can do that, whatever. And I just grabbed as many games as possible. With Start Playing, I just signed up and then hoped for the best and got nothing and kind of forgot it existed until I signed up for their mentorship program. And then that's when they actually were like, oh, hey, here's some tips and tricks on how to do X, how to get attention, how to draw people in. And that helped me actually start to gain people's interest. And the biggest one that they taught, which I was surprised at because it felt weird, but at the same time I get it, they said have your friends sign up. But don't charge them. Just have them sign up and fill seats so that people see, hey, you have people already willing to play. So I'm not the first person to sign up for this brand new game with this GM who has minimal reviews and no experience on the site. And that, I had 2 people sign up, and then that was enough that 2 more people signed up, and then we had enough for a game. And eventually those friends could leave. And when it got to a point that I could afford to have them leave and get a new person to pay me, there was an agreement we had made previously that at that time you can choose to stay, but if it gets to that point, then you would pay if you wanted to remain on the game. And one person did, and one person decided to leave, so it worked out in the end. But I think the biggest thing that surprised me was the amount of friendship that I've gained over it, because the people who have stayed, they legitimately care about each other and legitimately seem to care about me. And they're take care of yourself. Are you okay? It's if you're having a bad day, it's fine. Don't worry about it. They're calm and they're cool when I say, I don't remember where we were last week. Can you just remind me really quick? And then spark my ADHD brain to remember exactly what spot we started on. So it's way more relaxed, and I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting hardcore gamer style for some reason, because that's who I expected would pay for their games, and they would want it very specifically a particular way.
So maybe even thinking who might be accepting of those situations could be kind of a surprise shock versus. I mean, gamers are awesome. They just are. We love the hobby, I think, for gaming, and then the people that are in it sometimes just really put it over the top. Granted, there's some bad eggs out there, but it's the same.
Yeah, I've been very lucky too. I think not with specifically DMing professionally, but I think I've maybe played with 5 people in almost 20 years that I would never play with again, that I can remember off the top of my head at least.
Yeah. Don, what about you in that space?
I think that I love what Nikki said, and I think I had some similar experiences with players. The camaraderie in my professional games is really, really great. It means a lot to me. I think because I spent a number of years working as a bartender and bar manager after doing theater until I could move full time in my creative endeavors. And I had bartended when I was younger too, so it wasn't a new job to me. It's something I'd done, in college and a little bit after college. I think there's a lot of comparisons to being a good professional game master and bartending. It's very much about the experience, about making people feel comfortable, about making people feel heard, performing your job as a service, but also, you want to create that sense of home. And people who play games are looking for that. They're looking for an escape, for sure, but there's something more communal about games than that, regardless of what style of game you like to play. And so I was worried that by making it a profession, that players' expectations would tilt away from that and more towards, well, I just want everything to be perfect. Nothing ever goes wrong for my character. I don't care about the other player's experience. I only care about my experience. But that's never been the case for any of the players that I've had. They care about each other a lot. And I think you can encourage that with check-ins, safety tools, a lot of different things that you can do to focus in on what they're enjoying, let them give shout outs to the other players so they're all kind of supporting each other, and also let you know what it is they hope to see more of in the campaign. So like Stars and Wishes is one of the tools that I use in my campaigns. I find it so valuable to know what they want and to help them communicate it too, because not all players know how to communicate what it is they're looking for. So a lot of active listening, and I think it was it was a really good surprise to me how much of a community the games felt like. The other thing that surprised me was probably just how much work it is to do it full time. As I scaled up, I took on a lot of time debt. I was running 8 campaigns, and most of them were weekly, and to do them at the level I wanted to, I overstretched, and it took me a while to work out of that time debt and to kind of reshape my schedule. And there was some anxiety there around, like, when I tell my player group, hey, the prices are changing, and also we're, only playing twice a month instead of 4 times a month. I was worried that, they would be really bummed by that. But I was actually surprised by how many people said, now that things are starting to change again, I'm starting to go outside more. My job is no longer entirely remote; it's hybrid. Going down to twice a month is actually better for me too. So that turned out to be a very good surprise more recently for me.
How is that pressure to perform when you're doing it professionally? What is that? Do you feel that? Do you feel that pressure? Does it ever go away, Nikki? Or Don, go ahead.
No, I was going to say no. Not for me, at least. No, I mean, always some pressure. I think having a good system, for me, it depends on like how your brain works. My anxiety level goes down when I have routine that is repeatable, and figuring out how to create the repeatable routine for me so that I can finish my work for this campaign, set it aside. I don't think about it again until it's time to review it, to run the next session in 2 weeks, and move my brain to the next thing. That helped me reduce the amount of pressure. But I always, I really care about people's experiences, and I want them to have a great time. And that's not a given. Any given week, any given game, it's not a given. So there's always pressure.
I think I have, the same thing. Every single game I play in or run, I have that small bit of what if this one's not the one that's good? And even games that are just like with friends that I've had people tell me, this is fantastic, I'm loving it, there's always that like spark of doubt in the back of my head. Like, this is the one they're going to realize that I don't know what I'm doing. No matter how long you've been playing, I don't think imposter syndrome goes away. But it is, I agree with the safety tools and the stars and wishes, because that also gets the players to encourage each other. But also a lot of times they'll also say something like, I really enjoyed this part about the game. So then I also am reminded that, okay, they did enjoy what I'm doing, which helps with the anxiety. And it sounds egotistical kind of when you're like, yeah, tell me I'm doing good. But it's reassuring when they're like, I had a fun game. It was a blast. Because then I don't go think about it. Okay, what did I do wrong?
Yeah, that affirmation, I think, is huge with game mastering in general. Unless you've been with a group for 10 or 15 years, they may kind of blow it off. And that's, because it's just the way things are and go. But I don't think it's less important, but I think, when you're running for multiple groups, different people, different games, or people that are trying different games, you don't know where you stand, because there's such a dramatic, there's such a spectrum of scale on game master styles, even when running the same adventure. So Nikki or Don running the same thing and myself could be 3 different experiences for the same player. But if it's the same, so I think that feedback loop is always, I think, pretty important, even if it's just, I'm having a great time, because sometimes people just don't even say anything.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, if there's a problem, I'll let you know.
Yeah. And I have friends that are like that, where they're like, I love your DM style, but, and it's like, it's not really to me, but it's still like, it sucks. But when you were talking earlier, Dawn, about how being a bartender kind of helped you and learn how to work with people in a particular way, it was kind of the same thing, because I used to do training in quality analyst, so I had to learn how to talk to people in a very specific way to make sure that they didn't get upset or defensive, which I think has helped me a lot with taking on newbie players. And I love taking on newer players for my games, because they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, that's fine. You don't need to. You could be brand new, and I will help you along the way, as long as you're willing to learn. Then those are my favorite players, because you just have to encourage them how to role play. And that's really the hardest part about it, honestly, if you don't have experience. And having that 4 years of training and quality analyst experience, or 8 years of quality analyst experience, I was able to word things in a way that's like, hey, you did really good with this. Here's something you could have worked on that would have made it like just this much better. So like next time, try to work on that. If they ask for opinions, at least I won't just point it out if they didn't specifically ask for ways to improve. But real work does help with D&D sometimes.
That's right. So when you have clients or customers, are they individuals? Do they come to you as a group? Is it, somebody that's starting out that maybe can't find their home group? And I know some of these are like yes, yes, and yes. But what is the average that you typically see? Is it, hey, I've been gaming for 20 years and I just want a different experience, or something more consistent? Because let's face it, when there's money involved, there's a certain level of professionalism, right? So it's, if I'm going to pay Don or Nikki for a game, to be so many times a month, I'm probably pretty sure that there isn't going to be any huge scheduling snafus or an ongoing, it's 2 months down the road and we still can't get anything on the books. I understand, other things happen and you need to make accommodations for emergencies and things of that nature. But what does that look like for each of you, Don?
So when it comes to scheduling, I think that having a set time, obviously, it really helps. Again, I use a subscription model, and I think for me that it sets the expectation that at least I'll try to reschedule. And if it not, if for instance somebody has to miss because they have a birthday, I'll try to reschedule the game. And if it works for everybody and everybody's down with it, then we'll reschedule it for another date. Otherwise, people know in my games that, you might have to miss a session, and we'll catch up with your character. But in terms of setting the expectations of the players, approaching it professionally, I think that the more organized you are, the more it's going to help you. I use Discord for our communications. There's any number of ways you can do it. I try to provide a lot of resources to my players so that it's as easy for them as possible. For newer players, I offer to help manage their character sheets for them, and I teach them the game as they go. I have some players who are really, really mechanically minded, and I have some players who they are just there for the story. They don't care about the rules at all. And I think when you're a professional GM, you're going to get a lot of different kinds of players with different ideas of like what they're interested in. And so I will always, at the start of the campaign and every now and then throughout a campaign, I'll release like a Google survey and say, hey, what are your favorite parts so far? Rate them. Hey, what kind of things do you want to see going forward? Social intrigue, puzzles, battle maps. Like I'll get a little more specific than that. But that information, those surveys are really helpful to me to know what everybody wants. And I have some players who I'd say about a third of my business comes from word of mouth. So I have some groups who bring in their friends, players who've had a good experience with me. They'll bring in their friends and they'll join. I've run, mini campaigns and a couple of long-term, one I'm still running, campaigns for large groups of friends who one person knew me and they talked everybody else into it. And I would say the other 2/3 of my business, because I use a subscription model, my patrons, like even if they just back me at like $1 a month or whatever to get my newsletter, they have first dibs on open seats. And then if I can't fill a seat through my subscribers on my Patreon, then I'll create a video with like a voiceover, and I'll post it on social media like Twitter or wherever. And that's how I'll fill up like my couple of remaining seats if I need to. But I really don't have to do that very often. When I do, and I think marketing is really important to get those individuals who don't know anybody else. I think that going above and beyond in how you present your campaign, having an idea and a theme for your campaign that people will be compelled by is really, really important. So if everybody does exactly the same thing, exactly the same kind of like image marketing that they post on Twitter or Reddit, or, and start playing, they have like the kind of layout of how a campaign's described. When you go to their pages, it's very formulaic. If everybody's doing the exact same thing, then it's harder, I think, for you to stand out from other people. So I try to, when I do marketing, go above and beyond. And that's probably, I would say, how I get those individual players that I've never played with before and who don't know anybody else at the table.
For Start Playing specifically, I officially no longer have any of my friends in the game. So it's all people who have joined either through Start Playing or through friends of people who were in the game. A lot of them just find me because probably it's like next in line and they're looking for a game that night. That's the most common last minute entry. And it's been from different ages, like different types of people, though the two most recent ones kind of are two very extreme differences. One person hired me to do a newbie session. I started creating, whenever I have free time, I have a 2-hour newbie session where I will help you create a character from start and teach you exactly everything that it means to have that level 1 character. So if you've never played D&D before, you'll know what to do walking in with this character. And I explain you might need to make changes based off your DM's discretion, etc., and all that stuff. But the last one I did, they're like, yeah, I just need to find a game. I'm like, well, I do have an opening. You do not have to sign up for it, but I do have an opening on Sundays. Here's what the cost is. It's a brand new campaign. And they're like, actually, yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. I was actually really excited that you were a woman running the games, and I saw a lot of men in the games, and I was like kind of intimidated by it because they've tried to get into it before and were intimidated in the real life from it. And so that's when they joined. But then another person who joined literally today, they're like, I haven't played in 20 years. I've never used Start Playing before. You have a game tonight. Can I join?
So did
I'm like,
that
yeah.
person come from Start Playing then? Is that how they found you, Nikki?
Yep.
Okay.
All of my players currently either came from Start Playing or from me posting on the Wizards of the Coast D&D Discord server. But that stopped helping. Like the first time I posted or 2 times, I got some people from there. But after that, I didn't get anybody. Or I would get people who were like, didn't read the specific requests that I had, which were you have to be 18 or older and it's a paid game. So I always started asking that question because literally every single person who messaged me was under 18 or did not realize it was a paid game. And I don't, because there's romance in my games, sometimes I don't feel comfortable playing with people under 18. And having a 19-year-old as my own kid, I'm like, no, just be 18, please. Like at least 18.
Don, do you have the same restrictions as far as age goes?
Yeah. It's 18 plus, and I've done like kids' birthday party before. I've done a couple of things in person professionally. I honestly enjoy the experience. It might be my age and my worsening hearing, but I find it a lot easier to run online, to be able to hear everybody clearly online than I do in person these days. But I've done that before, and I think it's an entirely awesome way to go. If you love running for kids and you love kids, I think there's a real opportunity there for professional GMs. In the same way that if you love team building and improv, that I think corporate is a really great avenue for professional GMs. But yeah, 18 plus, and I think I think it's wise. I think, you're already going to get a different types of people with different interests. The more comfortable you can make the entire table, the better. And communicating your expectations. This is the cost. This is the time. These are the requirements up front, can help just kind of filter, like Nikki said. Sometimes you'll get a lot of people reach out to you and, they haven't read, or they're hoping maybe you'll make an exception for them, because they're 17, right? Or whatever it is. But by like just being straightforward about that, I think helps. And it also helps kind of protect your mental energy as well.
Sure. There is actually a website that does cater just to kids and running D&D, or not D. It might be just D&D, but role playing games, and it's only for kids, and it's, I think most of the times 30 to 60 minutes sessions, right?
It makes sense. I've seen like summer camps too, which I think is just a brilliant idea. I wish there was a D&D summer camp when I was a kid.
So cool.
Yeah, hero camps. I think some of them are referred to as. Yeah, we have one in the local game store that some of the folks that are affiliated with Gamehole Con and DDAL have organized some hero camps for summer kids for maybe, I don't know if they last 3 weeks, but yeah, the local game store. Go ahead, Nikki.
I will say that it's semi-related to getting people to join in expectations, but I just remembered a person that reached out to me. I don't charge very much. I charge $15 per person per hour, or $20 per person, or not per hour, sorry, $15 per session per person, and $20 for my city building game because it requires more effort.
And how long is a session?
3 hours.
Okay.
So if I have 4 or 5 players, then it's worth it. But if I only have 2 players and everybody canceled ahead of time, then I will cancel the game because it's not worth it at that point to play the game that night. But I did have somebody reach out to me to play, and their first question was like, what do you use for your maps? Like, how many images do you use? What do you do? Like, they were asking a lot of questions. I said, well, it's a lot of theater of the mind, but I'll put in a basic map, so you can understand at least where you are in the fights, so we can see, because I personally do better if I can tell they're 100 feet away from me in a D&D campaign. Oh, if I'm going to pay $15, then I expect to have da-da-da-da-da. They have like these expectations, and I'm like, okay, have a great day then. Like, I'm not going to change how I play for like that price. If you want that, go find someone who actually wants to provide that. And there's thousands of other DMs that may be willing to provide you exactly that option. And some of them are going to charge more money, and maybe I need to up my prices. I don't know. But for now, it's like, If you want that, go find someone who does that, who enjoys doing that, who has the time to provide you exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, expectations are a big one. And Don, I know you were commenting on the salary piece and what you were charging, and you started out a little bit lower. And then they say if you've got too much business, the first thing you do is increase your rates, right? Because then you can.
I think that was the case for me. Is like if I didn't do that, then I would never get out of time debt. I would constantly be working 80 hours a week and feel drained creatively. Yeah, I don't mind talking. I think part of the reason I randomly posted on Twitter, I'm not a huge social media user, but I posted on Twitter and told folks to reach out to me if they had questions, is because I do think that's industry that's new, at least mostly new. There have been people who've been kind of doing it for a while in one way or another, but it's picking up steam and it's growing in different ways. And I think it could use some demystification. Mm-hmm. I charge right now $350 for a session for the entire table divided by the number of players for that table.
And how long is a session for you?
My sessions are between 3.5 and 4 hours, depending on the schedule of that group. But I aim for between 3.5 and 4 hours. And I would say I started off, I'm not going to say what, like streaming, I made tips basically. And some weeks, some sessions, I got a lot of tips for, especially like maybe Black Roses Bloom, the Dragonlance campaign I ran. In some sessions, not so much. But I think I started my first private campaign $200, maybe $250 per session. So I've increased my rates a fair amount, but not a gigantic amount. But when I did the math on my time and, all the overhead that you kind of accrue, that was the only way I could do it where I could make it a sustainable living for myself. And I do think that I think Start Playing Games is really cool. It's gotten so many people into the profession, and it's such a well-designed platform in so many different ways. I would love to see these platforms like Start Playing or Demi Playing do more to push up the bottom rates of what GMs are getting paid so that it is a sustainable living. Because like with, I think you saw this when Uber first came out, for Uber drivers initially, the rates that they were getting paid were not a livable wage. It was not a sustainable wage. And over time, people had to kind of fight to push those platforms to put their workers more in the front of their priorities. And I think that needs to happen with professional GMing. I really, really feel very passionately that GM should get paid a living wage.
Yeah.
I did the math once, and I have to run 11 games at my current price to make what I was making in corporate. And that's not feasible or doable at all. Even without prep time, that's easily 33 hours minimum right there without the prep time, without the conversations and talking and admin and anything like that. So it's like, I can't do that. But one day I will bump those prices up. There are people who charge upwards of $100 per person per session on there, but there are people who charge like 10 still.
Yeah, that's there's so many questions I have. And I know we want to be conscious of time and everything. We're getting to the end of that hour, how fast it goes. So I want to kind of run through some, maybe we can kind of blast through some of these, not to leave anybody hanging that's dying to know about X or Y. So as far as like, what is the biggest misnomer that some people that you think is out there as a professional game master that is just not accurate, that you would want to set the record straight?
That it's unattainable.
It's unobtainable is one of the ones?
Yeah, like I've had friends who I stream with who are like, oh my God, you're a professional DM. You're at like a next level. I'm like, you can do it too. You just go sign up for the website and promote yourself and work a little bit. And you have plenty of people who know and love your podcast or your stream or whatever. Like if you put the word out there, I'm sure you'll get people to do it. I didn't know what the heck I was doing when I signed up for it. I still don't know what I'm doing half the time. Like anybody can do it as long as you put the energy into it.
Don, what do you think is one of the big misnomers?
One of them I already touched on, and that's that I think there's some people who are hesitant about paid games to sign up for them because they don't think that it can't compare to my home game with my friends. But that's just not been my experience. I think that the GM, if you're a professional GM, you can create that atmosphere. And if anything, having the financial support and time necessary allows you to do even more to create that atmosphere and help people connect in an age where connection's not always easy. I think is really valuable. But I think the other thing I see a lot is that making your hobby your job is a way to make you hate your hobby. And I think that is absolutely true for some people. And it's really worth thinking about, uh, I think, why that's true. And I think when you turn it into your job, all of a sudden you're thinking about routines and processes and how can I scale my business? And maybe you're working and prepping and running games a little bit differently than you're used to. And if those changes are, you're not in love with them, you don't love that process, it's not the same as running a game for your friends, which may be a process that you really love. And if that's the case, then I think that can be true for you. And so the nice thing about professional GMing is you can dip your toe in. You can start with one campaign that you run once a month, once every 2 weeks, once every week. And you can refine your process. You can scale up a little bit and say, look, that's too much. That makes me not love it as much. You can kind of take your time with it while you're doing whatever else you do, to put food on the table and take care of yourself and the people you love. And I think that's the way to go about it, that if you go all in before testing the waters and knowing if you'll feel the same way, it's really easy to burn out. So I think people are right on that one, but not always.
How do you decide what to run? And I say this for context, the game type, and whether it's a one shot, a one session, because a one shot sometimes gets a little gray. Like I'm going to do a one shot scenario, but it takes 3 sessions. So maybe a mini arc, or the grand, large, long campaign. How do you decide that? Nikki?
I did campaigns because I was hoping to get a group of people that were interested. I do one-shots for my podcast, and it's a lot more time-consuming to find people for one episode or one 3-hour session than it is to find people that are wanting something long-term. But as for the game specifically, though, I went with D&D just because it's the most popular and it was the easiest to fill. I will be adding some games in the near future for Necrobiotic, which is an indie TTRPG game, but that's because the creator of Necrobiotic is going to be purposefully pushing for people to go sign up to try the game with me. So I will have advertisement to join this game that is newer that most people don't know about. But that's the only reason why I'm willing to do it. But I want to try other games, but I don't have the experience and I feel comfortable doing it, or I don't think I'm going to get enough people to actually justify having it up on my schedule and cutting that 3 hours aside.
I love what Nikki said earlier. One of the things that she does is she offers like a new player sessions, a couple of hours. I'll help you create your character and kind of teach you the rules so that when you go play your game, whether it's with me or somebody else, you feel confident. I think that's great. I think one-shots require, on average, more prep time, more work, more signups, which is more marketing, which is more advertising, which is more work. I think that the way to do it for people who run short campaigns or one-shots is if they're running maybe the same module over and over again for different groups, which is a legitimate way to go about things. It depends on like who you are as a GM. I think I would burn out doing that. I always try to run original campaigns, and ongoing campaigns means that the group stays together longer. They build more camaraderie, and creatively it's a little bit more fulfilling. But most of my games are D&D 5th edition, but I don't necessarily say that when I pitch a game, on social media or to my patrons, that it's going to be D&D 5e, I come up with a core concept. If there's a setting involved like Dragonlance or Dark Sun, I'll say that this is going to be a Dark Sun game and a Dragonlance game. But once I have the player's interest in the concept, then I pitch them different systems and I create a survey. And the survey also is like, hey, are you more interested in theater of the mind? Are you more interested in battle maps? Because some people, and I can't remember the term right now, but there's a condition that a lot of people have. They can't visualize things in their mind.
Aphasia?
That's the one. And so for those players, battle maps are essential for them to be able to even understand what's going on.
Sure.
And some people, they need to turn that off, not look at the map so that they can imagine and enjoy their imagination. So knowing everybody's needs early on and giving them some options of systems. Most of the time, D&D is the most popular game, and most of my groups, especially new players, are most interested in trying that. But once one campaign ends, sometimes that group's like, you know what, we've been playing D&D for a while now. Let's try Mothership, and or what Call of Cthulhu or another game. That's how I go about it, though.
I honestly would like to try to switch towards how you have it in the near, like not now, but like in the future, because that sounds like it would actually be a lot more feasible and possibly give me the option to play the games that I want to play. Because I like D&D, don't get me wrong, but there are so many cool games out there that I want to play, and I'm like, half of my games are D&D right now. It's like I would like one of my games to be D&D and everything else be something else. Just a different game every day of the week.
Yeah, so many games. All right, last thing before we sign off. Okay, I'm listening to this episode. I might want to try my hand at becoming a professional game master. What is the 1 or 2 points of advice you would give somebody that is exploring this as an option?
If you're not having fun, then don't do it anymore. It's like with dipping your toe in the water and trying it out, do that first. Try it. I also personally think if you're going to first try it with some friends in the group, because then you are comfortable with those people that you've played with before. And that made it so much easier for me to get into playing with complete strangers that I didn't know, or I didn't. I played with strangers before, but it's always people who have podcasting or streaming experience. So they have a particular type of experience level or ability level, I guess would be the right term. So when I'm playing with complete strangers with limited experience and no computer knowledge and things like that, having people I know, I trust, and enjoy playing with makes that game easier to flow. And then those friends also can very easily help direct the rest of the group in the direction that we may need to go to kind of help a little bit if you're getting overwhelmed. And I think the second one is know your worth. And that's a hard one for everybody because I know I'm undercharging. But even with audio editing, I undercharged and then increased my prices twice now in the last year, and I need to do it again. It's just like, know what your value in time is and do all of the time, not just the time you're playing, because otherwise you're making less than minimum wage and you realize when it's too late.
It's funny when we say creators should get paid, and then we say, but I have such a low rate. You know,
it's a hard thing to fight because you're like, I should charge more, but also.
Right. Don?
I think, imagine that you're trying to, you love cooking and you want to be a private chef, which, is a viable career. I think GMing professionally is a lot of the same thing. You have to really think about, being self-critical in an honest way with yourself. What makes you unique and special as a game master? And everybody has their own strengths that they bring to GMing. And what don't you do as well? Or what don't you focus on? What can you improve? You have to be aggressive about being as good as you can possibly be if you want to draw people to you and keep them in your games. And you always be evolving. And that's hard, and it requires, really like constantly checking in with yourself and checking in with your players. But I think that's the main thing that can help you in terms of longevity. And I'd say the other thing that people don't really talk about or understand is like, how do I market myself? And I'm not a marketing genius. I don't, I'm not at all. But one thing that I know from being in online communities for, a long time, over 30 years, is that the landscape of online and online platforms constantly changes. There's constantly platforms that are losing popularity, become oversaturated with too many voices, that it's harder for you to get heard or seen, and new platforms that are creating new opportunities. So I think I was lucky in that I got in on tabletop streaming fairly early on. I think that if I were to take the same path that I took then, right now, that I probably wouldn't be as successful relatively, right, as I am. But constantly looking to what are the new platforms, what's the next thing where I might actually be able to have my voice heard more easily, is, I think, really important if you're an online creator in any industry. And, maybe that's TikTok right now. Maybe TikTok's already old at this point. I don't honestly know. But there's always going to be a next thing. And I think it's important to research and anticipate and, don't follow necessarily in the things other people have done, their footsteps, because you might experience diminishing returns that way. You kind of have to find your own path. And I think that's the best advice I can give.
That's fantastic. All good stuff. I really appreciate you two taking time to be on the show. I really do. I know this is going to be very intriguing to many folks out there. And we're going to have links to as many resources as possible, to include Nikki and Don's Twitter accounts and some of the things that they have going on. So check the show notes for all those details. But we appreciate it. Thank you so much for being on the show. I can't express that enough. So that's it for this episode. And I'll just sign off by saying, just be a positive force in the tabletop RPG hobby. This episode of GM Mastermind, produced with the help from the following members of the Mind: Joe Swick, Zagrave, Mirko Froelich, Tony Sugarloaf Baker, Polish Ogre, Larry Hollis, Hoos Carl, Harrigan, Farty McButterpants, Laramie Wall, Matthew Helsby, Aaron Relia, Wayne Peacock, Ron Bishop, Ghost GM, Old School DM, Craig Shipman, Larry Hout, and John Mahoney. Hey everyone, we're just starting out in this podcast. If you could do me a favor and let other folks know about it and have them subscribe or maybe give us a listen, that would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for supporting the show and being a member of The Mind.